Welcome to our webcast for June 24th. Our subject matter today: is your faith exciting or boring? How to overcome grievances and grudges, and a little deeper discussion on the dimensions of Torah as they reflect the manna from heaven, clouds, and the running water. So welcome. Why do certain people find satisfaction in Judaism while others are bored stiff? Ever thought of that question? Why is faith exciting for some and irrelevant for others? A joy for one guy, an absolute burden for the next. One fellow cannot imagine going to work without first putting on his tefillin, and the other hasn't seen his tefillin since his bar mitzvah some 40 years ago. This woman can't wait to get to shul, and the other can't wait to get out of there. Why? How do we understand this? This week, in the Torah portion for this week, we read about the ultimate mitzvah of faith, the red heifer. It's a statutory, a chok commandment, whose reasons still remain a mystery. I must admit, to take the ashes of a red heifer and sprinkle them on a person so he may attain spiritual purification is rather mind-boggling. According to the Medrash, the Almighty Hashem promised Moses that he would reveal the secret meaning of this mitzvah, but only after Moses would initially accept it as a divine decree. If he would first take it on faith, thereafter the rational understanding would follow. The truth is that there are answers to virtually every question that people may have about Judaism. Intelligent skeptics I meet are often amazed that what they had been long written off as empty, as rich emptiness, they're only so excited to find out they're actually philosophically profound, with rich meaning and depth. But the skeptic has to be ready to listen. You can hear the most eloquent, intelligent, intellectual explanation, but if you're not mentally prepared to accept, then the listening is worthless. There has to be a certain sense of acceptance. Because without that, chances are that you won't be actually impressed. Once we stop resisting and accept that there is an inherent validity to everything, then suddenly Judaism becomes all the sense in the world. It is a psychological fact that we can grasp that which we sincerely desire to understand. But if there's a subject in which we have no interest, we will walk into a mental blockage regularly. We'll never be able to handle it. The sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchok Schneerson, says this explains why some very astute businessmen may sit at a Talmud class and find themselves struggling to grasp the basic principles of Talmud, of rabbinic reasoning. Why is it that the same person who can concoct brilliant schemes in the boardroom fails to follow straightforward logic in the Talmud class? The answer, says the Rebbe, is that this businessman is really not that interested in the subject. But if it was half as important to him as making money, he might well become the greatest Rosh Hashiva, the greatest Talmudical scholar. So in the same way that God told Moses that he would come to comprehend the meaning of the red heifer, but only after he had accepted it, similarly today, those who genuinely wish to understand Judaism will succeed, but only if they buy into the product on some level first. When I was studying in the yeshiva, I would always try to attend the annual Encounter with Chabad. These were special gatherings for university students many years ago in Crown Heights. They were organized to expose Jewish students to Judaism over Shabbos, and there were lectures by leading rabbis and religious academics. Now, once a man shouted back at the lecturer, "How can you expect me to put on tefillin if I don't believe in God?" The speaker calmly replied, "First, put on tefillin, and I promise you will really come to believe in God as well." We all have a godly faith inside of us. We all have the pintel yid. It just needs to be revealed. As illogical as it may sound, if we start by observing a mitzvah, we find that our faith will follow through and begin to blossom. It has been shown to be true again and again. If we're not interested, no answer will be good enough. If we are genuinely searching for the truth and we are objective, there's ample and certainly meaningful answers to all of our questions. I'd like to move on to our second subject for today, overcoming grievances and grudges. Let's first imagine if a sculpture was formed of your likeness when you were young and strong. Now, 40 years later, you would look back and see yourself in your prime, frozen in time at the peak of your strength. Now, guess what? You would gaze wistfully at the strong lines of your handsome youth. And of course, we would always be longing to recapture it. But there would always be something in that facial expression that you would rather leave behind. What would that be? When you were 40 years later looking back at your sculpture. And that would be the immaturity and the foolhardiness of youth. In youth, when we're young, we were puffed up with self-importance and pride. We abandon friendships and unglue relationships at every perceived slight. That's what happened when we were younger. As we now grow older, we learn to appreciate the beauty and the vital necessity of friendship. In hindsight, we discover that losing a friend over an inability to forgive is pure vanity, emptiness. And the Torah teaches us the complex process of purification from ritual defilement. And I'm going to share with you the lesson that we can learn from this in relationship to our lives. Torah tells us, if a Jew becomes in contact with a dead body, he becomes ritually defiled. To be able to enter this temple, he or she was required to let 7 days pass. A Kohen was mix a concoction of water and ashes from the charred carcass of a perfectly red heifer, which was burnt along with hyssop, cedar wood, and crimson thread. Now, on the 3rd and 7th day after the defilement, this mixture was sprinkled on this defiled person. After immersing in a mikveh, a ritual bath, the person was now purified. The reason for this ritual and the reason why purification is rendered by this seemingly bizarre process are really beyond the realm of human understanding. King Solomon, the wisest of men, proclaimed that this mystical secret is beyond even his caliber of wisdom. So while we cannot fathom the underpinnings of this ritual, we can certainly glean a lesson or two from it in our lives. Most conflicts is sparked by an affront to our dignity. Chutzpah, is that the way you talk to us, so to speak? And most grudges are nursed to protect a bruised ego. A trusted friend makes an insensitive comment. A family member lets us down when we're particularly vulnerable and needy. These are the kinds of episodes that spark long-held grudges. In most cases, the comment is not as horrid as the implication that we discern in it. It is also eminently possible that the insinuation we heard really was never intended by our friend. But we dismiss this. We dismiss this possibility as being unlikely. At times, the insinuation was intended, and the friend is sincerely remorseful for that momentary lapse in judgment. But what happens? We refuse to offer a second chance. And the tragedy extends even beyond the dead weight of a past friendship. It becomes toxic, and this hatred ensnares everybody who comes close to it. Like this ritual impurity that we're discussing, it affects all who touch it, or even, those who associate with us from the distance. This toxic hatred must stop. Fortunately, we are able to stop it. How is this done? This is where this particular mitzvah provides us a lesson. We begin with the mix of hyssop and cedar wood. The cedar is a tall tree. The hyssop is a much shorter one. Grudges are born of an inflated sense of self-importance. We are too conceited to concede. So the first message is that the haughty cedar tree must learn to lie like a hyssop. Stop overanalyzing one's bruised ego and look at the larger picture. There's a wonderful fellow with whom you share a long and happy history that is being left out of your life because you refuse to forgive them. Another way to view the tall cedar and low hyssop is to think of perspective. The cedar's height enables us to see beyond its own circle. It takes in the entire neighborhood. The hyssop cannot see beyond itself because it's blocked by everything around it. When we hold our face close to the mirror, we see nothing. All we see is our face. If we step back, we take in, of course, the entire environment and see ourselves in our interest in a much larger context. At this point, we consider the ashes and the water. Ashes born of fire symbolize the grudges born out of anger that accompanies animosity. Now that we've seen and considered our friend's perspective, it's time to let go of your anger. The searing ashes must be doused in cool, soothing waters. The glowing flame must be extinguished before the toxins can be cleansed and the relationship can be resurrected. At this point, you have cooled your grudge and taken a broader perspective. You are no longer angry and don't think terribly ill of your former friend. But this is not enough. You must sprinkle the concoction of ashes, the water, the thread, and the cedar and the grass, and mix this. This is a mix of humility and annoyance. And on the third and the seventh day, often when we take offense at something a friend said or did, we're too angry to talk about it. So what do? We withdraw from the friendship without even giving our friend a chance to explain. We're too riled up to discuss it, and nothing can be said that might appease us. This, of course, is unfair and inappropriate. It is unfair to the friend who has no idea why you're so upset, and inappropriate, because the Torah prohibits hating another person in our heart. If we have a grievance, we must air it. Nursing a quiet grudge is a disservice to all of us. We don't bring up our grievances in anger. We wait several days to cool off. By the third day, we must bring our grudge to our friend's attendance and to his attention. We don't shoot him with burning flames or douse him with buckets of water. Rather, we sprinkle the gentle concoction of our grievances, tempered by this humbling feeling of having considered the larger perspective. We don't anticipate an immediate response, right? That doesn't happen automatically the first time. After sharing our feelings, we withdraw and give the friend a chance, an opportunity to reflect. In the process of purification, the concoction is sprinkled on the Jew once again on the seventh day, a second time, after which the person immerses in a mikvah and is purified. The same applies to reconciliation with the people around us. Several days after the first approach, we approach a second time. We have given our friend an opportunity to reflect. Now he or she can offer an apology, immersed in the cleansing, waters of reconciliation, and with Hashem's help, reignite the friendship. I'm sure you remember when Mitch Albom visited Maury Schwartz, his dying professor. They reflected on how dependent we become in old age. Mitch, said the professor, at the beginning of life, when we are infants, we need others to survive. At the end, when you get like me, you need others to survive. His voice dropped to a whisper, but here's the secret. In between, we need others as well. And together, we can overcome these shortcomings. And now, dear friends, I'd like to share with you, in the 20th chapter of the book of Numbers, we read how in the merit of Aaron, Moses, and Miriam, and in their merit, we receive special blessings. In the merit of Aaron, we had these protective surrounding clouds of glory around us. In the merit of Moses, we received the manna from heaven. In the merit of Miriam, we received the water. I'd like to share the deeper meaning of them as it relates to our third subject, dimensions in Torah, manna, clouds, and water. So the Torah tells us of the passing of Aaron, Moses' brother, in whose merit we all had the miraculous clouds of glory that accompanied us on our journey through the desert. Now, when Aaron passed away, the clouds disappeared. But they reappeared again in the merit of Moses. Now, two other outstanding miracles that accompanied us in our journey through the wilderness was the manna that fell daily and the well of Miriam, which supplied us all with water. What were the essential characteristics of these three miracles? The well, the manna, and the clouds of glory that provided us so much protection through those 40 years in the wilderness. Think in the following manner. The clouds of glory, which came in the merit of Aaron, protected the people externally. It surrounded everybody. They protected us from harsh winds. They exterminated the snakes and the serpents that infested the wilderness. They smoothed out the mountains, and they cleaned and pressed our clothes. As the Torah tells us, your clothes did not wear out upon you. All of these things were external functions. So the clouds of glory protected us on the external way. The manna, which was in the merit of Moses, was the wonderful food in which one could experience any taste one desired. Now, food, as compared to a cloud, food is something that is absorbed internally and provides us nourishment and sustenance. The well of Miriam was a source of water, which does not in itself nourish the body. The principal function of water is to act as a medium to carry the food to all parts of the body. These three aspects or dimensions of Torah are signified and parallel by the clouds, the external, the manna, internal, and the well that carried everything around. Now there is an aspect of Torah. These three aspects also are part of in our own psychic as well. There's an aspect of Torah which is absorbed internally, like the manna. There's an aspect of Torah that provides us external protection, like the clouds of glory. And then there is the aspect of Torah that is to be compared, that carries the external protection and the nourishment to all of us, like the Miriam's well. Manna in Torah comes from the Hebrew word horah, means to teach, signifying that Torah provides us a code, a guide for our conduct in life. This guidance must be thoroughly understood and absorbed, so that each person now may exactly know how how to guide his own conduct and that of his family and household. Just as the manna was presented in different ways to those at different spiritual levels, the righteous found it ready to eat, while others had to grind it. So in Torah, it's ingested in different ways according to our capacity of the individual. There are some who fulfill the obligations of Torah study by reading just the Shema, if more is not possible for them, whereas others have the obligation to study Torah all day. So we're explaining how these three aspects apply to us. The clouds of glory in Torah, how do they express themselves? When we step out into the parched wilderness of the everyday world, where evil forces are so much around us, like snakes and scorpions in the Sinai desert of old, Torah protects us by the force of self-sacrifice that each of us and all of us have by virtue of this intrinsic connection that we all have with Torah. Just as a Torah scroll is complete and sacred when all the letters are complete, so all of us together form a totality of holiness of Israel and of the Torah. And even if a Jew, maybe on the lowest spiritual level, on the Torah common denominator, nevertheless, that self-sacrifice, the potential to give one's life for God is there. This dimension is the clouds of glory of Torah. The clouds encompass, protect all of us. There's a uniform, even those on the edges, so to speak. All of us are protected by Torah. All of us have the ability to imbibe, like the manna, take within ourselves. So in a similar way, this aspect of Torah accompanies each and every one of us, or whoever we may be. It gives us strength to go forward through the wilderness of life, not to be afraid of ideals and snakes and serpents, so to speak, but to be constantly imbued with the spirit of self-sacrifice. That's the level of the clouds of glory, something that protects all of us. We're all in it together. We also have the idea of manna, which we imbibe, we internalize. Then we have the Miriam, the water of Miriam. How does that be explained in Torah? You see, water has the essential characteristic that descends from high places to low places. The Torah too descends from heights of loftiness, of divine, Hashem's profound wisdom, that now becomes enclosed in actual letters and words of the written law and the oral law, thereby becoming available to all of us, just like water comes to us. Whoever recites the words of written Torah, even if he does not understand what the words mean, or learns the oral Torah, the Mishnah, the Talmud, the commentaries, even if he understands no more than the simple explanation, that person receives the nourishment like the manna and protection, the clouds of glory of the Torah. We have it all from all sides. So dear friends, let us appreciate that all of us are protected, just like in the wilderness. The Jewish people were protected by clouds of glory. They imbibed nourishment from the manna which they took in internally. And the water in the merit of Miriam that helped bring it connected to all parts of the body, so too we can appreciate. We have the Torah that provides us protection. The Torah learning provides us an inner dimension, becomes part of our life, and every aspect of it completes, making us a complete, holistic individual in every single level. My friends, I appreciate you joining us, and have a great day and a good week.